Hi, we're Byron and Francine Parola, and we're the conveners of the Renaissance of Marriage Conference here in Sydney, Australia.
We're gathered with around 180 delegates from around Australia and a number of international guests, mostly from America.
The purpose of the Renaissance of Marriage Conference is to bring Catholic leaders together who have an interest and work in the area of marriage formation, from the very young right through to couples who might be in crisis in their own marriage. So it involves couples, it involves pastoral workers, religious, bishops and priests and nuns. All of us have a particular investment and interest in married life and helping married life be successful, both in a Catholic context, but also just for the sake of the world.
One of the reasons why we hosted this conference was that there are a lot of people working for marriage in the Catholic Church, and it can be very lonely and very draining. And there's not much there for us to gather as a group, to be nourished by each other's presence, to pray together, and to be inspired in the work that we do. So it's been really just so lovely and so encouraging to be here with some of our colleagues from around Australia, to be able to do some of that for each other, to learn what each other are doing, learn from the lessons of each other, and also just to encourage each other.
The main purpose of what we do together, though, is to actually think about what we might do different, to have a greater impact in the world in terms of bringing the real insight of what marital love has to offer both each other as husband and wife, our families, and our communities and the whole world. Basically, we're trying to find out how to actually make marriage really reach its full potential and be a loving witness of God's love in the world by the way married couples live.
So we came to the field of marriage formation many, many years ago, actually shortly after we were married. We were privileged to have both parents who were involved in ministry to married, and so it sort of seemed quite natural for us to pick that up as well. And shortly after we were married, we had the privilege of working on a marriage enrichment seminar with Father Chuck Gallagher, the founder of Worldwide Marriage Encounter. And he was particularly keen to develop something for couples that really focused on the complementarity of men and women. At that time, Pope John Paul II had already written his theology of the body, but we actually weren't aware of it. So we began working on these materials with him, and we brought it back to Australia about 25 years ago and began running seminars here. Long story short, we're now bringing all of those rich resources that we've developed and are putting them online so that they're accessible all over the world.
So the courses that we run all run under the name of Smart Loving. And that simple name captures actually what we try to do. We try to help couples work out how to be smart lovers, how to be efficient in their loving. And as married couples, that's all about how a man loves a woman and a woman loves a man. And so what we're actually doing is helping men understand how to love a woman, and as a woman, how do you understand to love a man? And believe you me, that's tricky. And so smart loving, the idea of smart loving is that we're trying to actually be efficient in our loving. We haven't got time, we're busy parents, and we make mistakes all the time. We want couples to be successful, we want them to be smart in the way they love, not dumb. And so Smart Loving is the name we use for our pre-marriage courses, our courses for couples who just want some enrichment, or for couples who might be in distress with some real challenges in their relationship and who doesn't have that at some stage. And so under all those different applications, we come from the purpose of basically, how do you love smart? Our smart loving work is done from the Catholic framework, but the Catholic framework is just an insight how to live life. And so while we unapologetically teach from a Catholic mindset, we find our materials are relevant to everybody from any faith or no faith tradition.
I was asked 2 years ago to create an inventory, a questionnaire for a Catholic company, a ministry in the States called Dynamic Catholic, founded by one of Sydney's finest, Matthew Kelly. Some of you may be familiar with him. And he longs to see the people of God brought into the church in a deeper way, in a human way, in an excited way. And so what he's done is he's created this program to have moments where there are moments of encounter and to nourish the human experience at those moments. So for instance, baptism. Parents sign their kids up for baptism, and they bring their child in, you get a kid baptized, and then you leave. And it's usually a tremendous missed opportunity. Marriage is another one of those. We certainly have a lot more in terms of marriage preparation, and the priest is more involved, and we have wonderful other ministries involved, but it can be a missed opportunity. And so the programs from Dynamic Catholic are being planted along the lifespan of moments of encounter between people and the church, all the way up to masses of burial and bereavement and everything. It's really the full lifespan. Well, I was asked to work specifically on the marriage inventory for the moment of marriage. And this is something that you can find if you go to marriageprep.dynamiccatholic.com. And so this inventory is produced now, and it's been used for the last year and a half. And it can be used by couples themselves or facilitators that are chosen by a parish. Now, the beauty of the Dynamic Catholic model is that it's totally free. They're not trying to get money out of people for it. And so what happens is it creates an access to a resource that comes with no strings attached. And that means it's got to have real deep meaning. There's no special marketing. There's no tricks. It's got to really capture you and want to keep bringing you back for more. And so what we've done over the last year and a half is compile the data, the results from the inventories themselves and the feedback. And the feedback especially is incredibly insightful. And that's what I want to share with you this morning. So we've given out the inventory. It's been accessed and taken almost 5,000 times since we launched it. Again, both by facilitators running it for couples or couples doing it individually. And so what I want to give you this, just a snapshot of the top 5 insights that we've gained from the inventory so far. And this is something that I hope that you can all take with you in your own particular ministries and use these insights and help sort of spark that thought, maybe getting outside of the box, maybe stirring up a bit of mischief in your work to think, how can we implement these insights into our work and shift things a bit? So the first insight, actually interestingly, comes from divorcees who have taken the inventory. So we see things at the other end when things don't go right. And one of the insights is that there was not enough understanding of what marriage is supposed to be in the first place. So certainly this is the work of marriage preparation. But the feeling was that if this inventory had been available in the beginning, either A, a person would know not to marry the particular spouse or partner, or number 2, the particular areas to work on, to try to save the marriage. Where are the problem areas, and what are the most critical points that, if worked on, will then heal the rest of the marriage? So that was really interesting to kind of get a number of people sending in feedback, kind of looking back on failed marriage and seeing how it could have helped bolster a life of flourishing through marriage. Number 2, what we found is that people don't know how to think about relationships, kind of along the same lines, but even healthy marriages that are mostly flourishing, the finding is that we want to do better. We actually want our marriages to be better, but most of the time, we just have no idea how to think about doing that. And so by providing this resource, by having this kind of inventory, again, it points out those critical points to go back to and look at. There's a lot of frustration we found at lack of good models. So we have a lot of good ideas, but we don't have good models. And what would come from good models is an understanding of what those critical points are. And when it's modeled, it's more intuitive. But without the model, without the intuition, we have to rely on things like an inventory, and it'll just particularly pick out those areas that need to be worked on. And then once a couple knows what to work on, they want to get to work. This is a beautiful thing. This is really hopeful. A lot of times in marriage ministry, at least I find in the States, we could develop a sort of cynicism, and we feel like we're fighting a losing battle. We feel like we're pushing the boulder uphill. And it's really hopeful to understand, to come to learn that most couples want to work on their marriage. Most couples want to do better. They just need to be empowered with the knowledge, with the tools to help bring it to the next best place. And then the third insight is that along those same lines, knowing how to work on the relationship is important. So not only do you need to know what to work on, but you have to know how to work on it. And because this resource is free, and because it's relevant, it then becomes repeatable. And what we've found is that many couples are coming back to the same inventory, and they're repeating the process to measure their progress. Pope Francis in Amoris Laetitia and in many other places describes marriage as an apprenticeship. A lot of work with my couples in marriage prep has to do with, a lot of young couples think, I have to get it right. I have to become perfect. Our relationship has to be perfect so that we can get married. And you kind of, if you're married, you know that that's very naive. When we start marriage, we start the process of becoming perfected through our vocation. It's an apprenticeship. That means we're going to be learning throughout the lifetime. Whether you're married 1 year, 5 years, or 40 or 50 or 60 years, you still see your vocation as apprenticeship. Well, if you can't measure something, you can't fix it. And what we've done with this inventory is created a very simple way to measure problem areas in the relationship. And so people come back around after 6 months, and they revisit the same categories, the same areas in the inventory, and find out how they're doing. And it's just a mark of measurement that'll give them either the consolation of knowing they're doing really well, or the challenge to keep going in particular areas, sometimes with some desolation, that they have to do a little bit more work in that area. But it's hopeful because it's positive, and it keeps us looking forward in the direction of flourishing. The catchphrase, the motto of Matthew Kelly and Dynamic Catholic is to become the best version of yourself. And everything they do, including this marriage prep program, is to help your marriage become the best version of itself. Every facet of your life to become the best version of itself. So having this free and repeatable resource is one way to continue growing along that trajectory, to continue in this apprenticeship, to work towards our perfection that we're called to in the vocation of marriage. The next insight is that we've not been given the education in how to have a great conversation. The inventory gives us certain points to spark the great conversation. Now, this might come as a shock to you, but men are typically not as interested in conversation as women are. And this becomes a bit of a problem because the person that you're signing up to spend the rest of your life with, until death do you part, is not the same sex as you are. And if you happen to be married to a man, if you're a woman, you realize that conversation can be pretty tough sometimes. Well, here's the thing. We assume that all women know how to have good conversation. Well, that's true to an extent, but most women don't know how to have good conversation with a man. And so when women get together, they can have all sorts of great conversation. But when men don't have that training and they don't have the same way of communicating as women do, and actually men do have good conversation, and they're different conversations. So we might be led to believe that communication needs to be burdensome and that conversation is always going to be really hard. It doesn't have to be this way. We just need to give a little push, a little instruction. And so what this inventory does is it opens up great conversation. People say sometimes, couples need to take a date night, right? And then you go out on a date night. And then what happens? Mostly you're talking about the kids and the finances and all the problems. Then you say, okay, stop talking about kids and finances and problems. And then there's this grand silence. What else are we supposed to talk about? Well, that's what we need, little sparks. And if we have those, then we discover couples love talking to each other. At the heart, at the root, underneath the resentment or the conflict or the tension, we really do love each other, and we really do want to be friends. And so if we have these sparks, if we have these little prompts, then we can actually engage in great conversation. And then what this does is opens up a whole new vista for marriage. And this is something that's not talked about often enough. And that is the capacity of the human heart to dream. Very seldom are we asked, what is your dream? What do you want in life? When we're so stuck on problem solving and we're so stuck on conflict resolution, we can't actually go past all of that into the future with hearts of hope, looking towards flourishing, looking towards becoming the best versions of ourselves. And each one of us is so precious in the eyes of God, so unique, so wonderfully and beautifully crafted. And each one of us has this story, a narrative. And God is giving us what we need to grow in the direction of where he's drawing us to. And that looks so different for everybody. And so even between spouses, to sit down and to be able to say to your spouse, what do you dream of? Who do you want to become? Where do you want to live? What do you see us doing in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? What kind of person do you want to become? What kind of couple do you see us becoming? Are we the couple that's the life of the party? Are we the couple that always does the old Irish exit and leaves early without saying goodbye to anybody? What are we known for? Let's dream about it. So when we move past the problem solving, we can open up that potential for moving out into greatness. So these are just 5 very simple insights that I think can be really relevant to different ministries in the church. And I think if we go deeper with each one of those, we can unpack them and we can look at ways that we can shift or pivot our own ministries and really touch the heart of what men and women are longing for.
The people who come to the conference are all people who work in family life and married life in some form. We might have marriage counsellors here, people doing pre-marriage education, people in schools doing education. The purpose of the conference is to enrich those people and to help equip them with greater tools and ideas of how to do their work. So while there's only 180 people at this conference, these people go back into their communities and will be touching the lives of literally thousands of people. So this conference is very important. It brings together the leadership, gives that leadership a real re-injection, a real energy, real fuel, but also gives them real insights and some exciting new ideas to take back into their communities. So it's a bit like starting a small fire. It starts with a small spark, but with a wind behind it, it can actually spread rapidly and quickly. And that's what we hope for this conference.
One of the themes that we've been pursuing for these last 2 conferences has been the unpacking of Amoris Laetitia, which is an amazing document and has so much depth and richness to it. And so that's been an ongoing theme for both conferences. And what's really come through strongly this time in particular has been this call to accompaniment. And it's one of those things that none of us really know how to do that. We have such great leadership and teaching from the past 2 popes, Pope Benedict and John Paul II, in terms of understanding the doctrine and the law. But how do we apply that in these really tricky situations particularly? It's sort of easy in some circumstances, but in others, it's quite difficult to know how do we apply that in those difficult cases. And more importantly, how do we as a church bring the mercy of Christ into those very difficult, heartbreaking situations that so many of our brothers and sisters find themselves in?
Of course, the other part of it is just every married couple has a great story. They've got disastrous situations, they hurt each other deeply, and there's great joy in their marriage. And part of what we do is just remind ourselves that we're all human, we're all learning. And I think that every marriage, while it has its challenges, part of the challenges are the way we grow as people. And again, this conference is to give people hope. It's to take a message out that actually marriage is not a package of dreams. It's not a white picket fence and everything will be easy and they live happily ever after. But nor does it have to be a terribly arduous journey. And with simple insights about how to love effectively, how to be generous to each other, how to be forgiving for each other, how to laugh at our own mistakes, we can actually make ordinary marriage is extraordinary, and that's part of the dream of this conference. We've moved, and not surprisingly, from a time when all of our work was done either in the written form or in live presentations, but of course now with the way media is moving, particularly digital media and digital distribution, almost all of our work is going online in some form, usually in the form of video, sometimes audio podcasts and so on. And we're really excited by that because we can take very simple insights and package them in ways couples can get to them. But, we're busy. So when do you have the time? Well, actually, you can do it anytime you like. And so our vision for our work is to basically create both deep and extensive, but also simple, bite-sized chunks of insights, practical insights of how do you love effectively, how do you live out the mission we have to be God's love to each other by the way we love each other. And we have a wonderful sort of dream of basically making that available at any time, in any place, for any couple or any person who's married to do that.
One of the things we're very conscious of is we've struggled over many years to recruit for our seminars. People love them when they come there and they can't believe that they waited so long to come. But convincing them that they will enjoy it and that they should come and finding the time for it is really difficult. One of the great things about being online is that when people are searching for something, they can find us, and they can find us from anywhere in the world. And we're seeing that already with our Engage course, which has got couples from Poland, from England, from Asia, from the Americas, of course from Australia and New Zealand as well. They're coming from all over to experience some of our resources and to prepare for their marriage.
And of course, the great thing about doing something on video, you can always edit out your bloopers. When you're doing it live, you can't do that. So it's a great media, and it really helps us get the message out.
We're here at the Renaissance of Marriage Conference 2018 with Archbishop Anthony Fisher. Archbishop Fisher, Paul VI was a visionary. In Humanae Vitae, he brought to light the consequences of the sexual revolution which very few people could have imagined. His work, published in 1968, is incredibly relevant now in light of the breakdown of marriage, the dysfunction in families, the questioning of self, especially in terms of gender and sexuality, the genocide of the preborn, and so much more. The focus here at ROM meets a great need. What do you hope to be the takeaway of delegates from this conference?
I think when we use the word prophetic of Paul VI and Humanae Vitae, most people think when they hear the word prophetic that he could see into the future. I don't know how well he could see what was going to be like by 2018. I think it probably would have frightened him if he did. But it is true that he had a sense of where things were going. This is right in the heart of the sexual revolution in the 60s. The pill is just starting to be marketed worldwide, and a lot of people would have said, oh, you're being too pessimistic. Actually, love's going to solve everything, more intimacy, more sex, everyone's going to be happier, it's going to be a better world, a peaceful world. And look what's actually happened. We now, as a civilization, are probably the least successful at relationships of any civilization in history, the least able to sustain our relationships and our commitments. And we see all the effects on broken families and the killing of our unborn children and so many other ways. So Paul did have, I think, a kind of divine wisdom that meant he could see a bit further than most of us. But there's another important sense of the word prophetic, and really the more important sense. And that is, the prophet is someone that speaks the truth, even when it's unpopular. And Paul VI had to do that. He knew that what he had to say to the world was divine truth. It was the truth of God's plan for our bodies and our relationships, for our marriage and family, but that it was not what the world at that time wanted to hear, and perhaps often since. But he gave us the example of someone who courageously spoke for the truth anyway. And I hope those that leave this conference come away not just with a sense of that there are some big challenges for us in our world at the moment with our relationships, our sense of our own bodies, our marrying and family making, but that there are big challenges, sure, but we have a truth, we have a divine wisdom to offer the world that really is good news, that really will make people happy and make them flourish and make our relationships work again. And so to go away with both senses of being prophetic, not just diagnosing the problems of our culture, but also having a wonderful solution to offer in the gospel of life and love.
Greetings from Brisbane, Australia, which is very far from where most of you are. In Jesus Christ, what we hear, what we discover, is the good news. Here we find in Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, good news for everybody. And that's why Shalom Media really does have a contribution to make. Shalom Media is seeking to communicate to families and to show to the world the truth and the beauty of what the family is within the plan of God. May the blessing of God really come to you through all that is offered in Shalom World by Shalom Media. The word Shalom itself comes from Hebrew, as you know, and it means peace. May the blessing of God's peace, the Shalom of God, for which we were created, may it come to you from the God who is peace, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Shalom World, God's own channel.